The World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland has certainly been making headlines around the world. South Africa has been one of the largest delegations attending the event, and part of the delegation is South African National Planning Minister Trevor Manuel. CNBC talked with him earlier on to find out about his views on the importance of the World Economic Forum and South Africa's reputation at that forum. Here he is.
The conversation's always very important. You know, the big thing about the forum is it offers an opportunity to talk to people. If people just read a newspaper online or piece of paper in their hand, they don't get the sense. And for me, more important than sitting in big sessions is the ability to take people, sit around, have a cup of coffee, afford them an opportunity to ask questions about the country, about the issues. And I think that is irreplaceable, because there is no other forum that is as big as this, that allows for this kind of interaction. It's why I think the South African delegation needs to keep coming back to ensure that we can persuade people about why certain things are taking place in the country, or where there are things that aren't quite according to plan, how we would correct them. One of the issues, for instance, is Marikana. And when you say to people that nobody in government feels that Marikana is something that we should feel proud of, you can then say, but the Farlam Commission is sitting as we speak. You know, the detail of the Farlam Commission is not something that the press reports on across the world, and people can understand that that's a rational response to a tragedy that all of us feel equally in the country.
Just how much assuring do you have to do to the global investment community right now?
Look, there are a number of sources of information. I think that one thing that we must understand very clearly is that people who want to take decisions have a number of sources of information. So even as we gathered here, the IMF released a report on the World Economic Outlook. In South Africa, people say, oh, the IMF has downgraded us. But hold on. What those of us who are here in Davos know is that the IMF has downgraded their World Economic Outlook for 2013. So we shouldn't feel exceptional about this. And so in dealing with a variety of sources of information, we know that we've got to get in there and talk to people. Even if you look just at the African agenda. When we first started coming here, and 20 years would take your viewer back to just before the arrival of democracy, when we started coming along with Madiba before he was President of the Republic, there's been a lot that has taken place, but South Africa was exceptional on the African continent. Other countries weren't here, they hadn't quite cottoned onto the idea of speaking to investors and so on. We have to do a lot of heavy lifting now. We must persuade people who now have options on the African continent, and the idea of South Africa as a single gateway isn't there. But I think that if we let up on our responsibility to persuade people, then I think we would lose out as a nation.
You highlighted the issue around the labour situation over in South Africa, and you know what we've seen erupt as a result of that. Another risk, of course, has been the uncertainty around economic policy, nationalism, very much on the agenda. How do you make sure that nationalism, protectionism do not win the upper hand in international relations?
Well, at one level, I think that the ANC 53rd National Conference had been very reassuring. It's actually amazing to talk to investors who live in Finland or Iceland or Japan and know that they have followed the events at an ANC conference just before Christmas. And so the fact that nationalization is off the agenda is very important. Since then, there's been the interactions around AMPLATS, and again, it's necessary to talk to people about what the legislation says, what the licensing requirements are. And I think that there's a reassurance that we can offer people. At the same time, the world right now is grappling for solutions to policy. The fact that in large parts of Europe, youth unemployment is as big a tragedy as it is in South Africa. the fact that issues have erupted in countries that had not known these kinds of issues, like India. The tragedy of the death of a young woman who had been raped has suddenly exploded into all manner of issues. The world is grappling with issues differently. At the same time, governments across the world have to find what will create the exceptionalism so that we can raise the living standards of people on a continuous basis. This is not about individual deals, it's about creating opportunities so that we can grow the economy in order to raise the living standards of our people. That's what we're doing here.
When it comes to South Africa specifically, what do you see government needing to do to address what really are structural problems at this stage?
I think that one of the first things we've got to do as a government delegation is to go back, take out our notebooks, look at what people have told us, and use those as learning points, because this is not just about how successful we are. I think it's in understanding the questions that we find difficult that will actually give us the strength and resilience and the ability to improve, because that's what a number of countries are doing here. You can feel their presence in so much of what they're doing. A number of the BRICS countries are doing this. Some of the other G20 countries, you can feel their presence. You know, it's not like before when the US and Europe could walk in here with a swagger. They're facing similar challenges, and that's what we've got to understand about the world right now.
Certainly being highlighted here as one of the risks facing economic growth on the continent and in South Africa as well is the infrastructure deficit. Run us through plans on the agenda there and some of the plans that the National Planning Commission are taking forward through to 2030.
Well, I think that there's a very strong message. The message of the National Development Plan is, I think, pretty well understood, not just in the country, but by a number of key players here. The second strand of this is the Africa infrastructure challenge. President Zuma spoke about this on a panel, a CNBC Africa panel that dealt with de-risking Africa. He leaves from here to Addis Ababa, where the AU will talk about the infrastructure challenge. The plans are all laid. We must now ensure that those decisions are actually turned into shovel-ready projects. We must see the concrete go down. We must see the bridges being built. We must see the border crossings between countries being opened so that our trade can improve both within Africa, but also between African countries and the rest of the world. We need to manufacture, we need to grow our economies, and we're not going to be able to do it without that necessary infrastructure. So the issues, I think, are well understood, and we must ask not just of Davos, but with the AU summit coming hard on the heels, and virtually every African head of state who's here will tail off to Addis to take that discussion forward. We must ask, when that meeting concludes on Sunday evening, whether our heads of state have taken the appropriate decisions to drive forward that agenda. It's an African agenda for infrastructure, and through it we will articulate how we will raise living standards for our